Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And we've hit that kind of weird phase of the NFL offseason where draft is over. We're still kind of talking about it, but at the same time, there's a whole bunch of nothing going on right at this point. So for this show, we were granted a small piece of news to work with. CJ Ham is obviously working out at the fullback position, so we'll talk about that a little bit here. Then Drew and I are going to do some NFC North analysis, what we thought of the other three classes aside from the Vikings and how they kind of stack up with it, and we'll kind of see where that tangent sort of leads us. And then we'll round it out with we're going to introduce a new segment. We've tried in the past to introduce new segments. Some of them have worked, some of them haven't. Hopefully this one will catch on. You guys get to name this one too. Basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be ranking a top 5 of something every single week. For this week, we're ranking Rick Spielman's top 5 draft picks, and we'll explain the nuances of what that top 5 means once we get to that point in the show. So let's start it off here, Drew. CJ Ham, first of all, tell me a little about this guy. Division II guy out of Augustana. I feel like he's kind of an unknown for a lot of Vikings fans.
Yeah, he was in camp and preseason, I guess, last year. He stuck around the practice squad throughout last season, and he was kind of what's that other running back that was in Minnesota last year? The quicker kind of scat back.
Yeah, he's the one
player
that Green Bay stole from us.
Yeah, that's right. I don't remember his name, but
I'll look it up. Keep talking.
Anyway, CJ Ham was the opposite. He was more of the kind of not lightning quick, but kind of just a bruiser, fall forward type runner.
Bowling ball.
And, yeah. And then this other guy who
I'm getting there.
You're getting his name, but they were kind of the thunder lightning type of combination in preseason last year, and Ham ended up sticking on the practice squad, and this other guy who you're eventually going to find his name is ended up being cut. And Green Bay had him for about a week, and then he was off of Green Bay's team. So anyway, Ham has been around for a little bit, and supposedly he's switching over to fullback, which, thinking about it, makes a lot of sense. The Vikings did not bring back Zach Line at fullback, and CJ Ham has, I think, the same build to play fullback, and I think given how little a fullback is used in Pat Shurmur's offense, I think it makes sense to, if you have a guy like this, to kind of maybe transition him to that role where maybe he can play that and then still provide running back depth as well. Because I think Jerick McKinnon with Dalvin Cook in town now, I think McKinnon as a slot receiver makes a lot of sense, or kind of in more of a slot role than he's been in the past. And so with that, you have Cook and you have Murray as your running backs, with McKinnon kind of as a wild card playmaker instead of more just a running back only. So then you can have Ham be running back depth and play fullback. I think it gives him a shot at making the roster, and it gives the Vikings some flexibility as well. So, I think it makes a lot of sense for both teams here.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you made there. And the guy that you were looking for, it kills me that I didn't have this one offhand, because it was one of my camp crushes. Jarrell Presley, that's a guy. You remember that? Because I
knew it was a kind of a funky first name.
Because we were actually talking about the first podcast that we did for the show was actually previewing training camp. We're actually coming up on our 1 year. And then we talked actually a lot about Jarrell Presley and CJ Ham in the camp episode. So if you want to go all the way back to episode like 4 or 5-ish, we did talk about a couple of these guys way back in the early days of the About the Labor podcast here. But going back to what Drew was saying about CJ Ham, the number one thing here is I think that this is an instance where a guy wants to make the 53-man roster, and he's doing literally everything in his power to do so. CJ Ham is a guy that I think has the ability, the God-given ability, in like the bar level talent to be a quality fullback at this level. I did some of the measurables and athletic testing scores, like what he got coming out, and measured them up against fullbacks that I think have been very successful in this league. The one that stood out to me was his similarity to Jerome Felton. He looks quite a bit like him. Burst is very similar, but obviously fullback is a lot about technique, recognition, and just knowing kind of where you need to block. Because sometimes, obviously, in a zone scheme, sometimes you're in charge of just finding the right guy to get in front of. Sometimes you have a specific guy that you're assigned to. Regardless, there's some nuances that CJ Ham is going to have to learn. But does he have the physical ability? Does he have the athletic talent? Can he be a guy that contributes, 5 or 6 snaps every game, whatever it is, in that I formation that Dalvin Cook ran out of so well, or something with this, a split set in the backfield? Yes, and he does have that athleticism too. So if you give him a handoff, he's not exactly, he's not a dead runner. He's no fullback. He didn't run a 5.0. He ran about I think it was a 4.67 40-yard dash. So he has some burst to get him off the line in some sort of fake. If you want to, for example, this is what comes to my head. Rodney Adams in the slot. You got CJ Ham in the fullback spot. You got Dalvin Cook at your halfback spot, lined up in the eye. You do a fake end-around handoff to Rodney Adams. Keep him in there as kind of your. He's a guy that you can obviously use in different ways. One being just as a way to keep defenses honest. Get half of the linebackers across from you flowing with Rodney Adams, and just do a quick handoff to CJ Ham for a 4 or 5 yard gain. He's the type of athlete that can definitely do that type of stuff. So. Simply put here, I'm a big fan of transitioning CJ Ham over to fullback, and I really hope it works out for him because he was a great guy to work with. This is not a job. Speak with at training camp last summer for me.
Yeah, and I think he. I've heard a lot of good things too about just his character and kind of his work ethic as well. So I feel, I assume this is kind of something that has been taking place all off season, and they're finally now just kind of. Sure. It's I guess being made aware to everybody now. I think it was initially broken by simply a tweet of his responding to Paul Allen.
Yeah.
So I think
he didn't get in trouble for that, by the way.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't see how, but I don't really
there's
know.
always those weird things.
Right.
I'm just saying.
We'll never know how that kind of those policies work inside the doors, but. I assume this is something they've been working on all offseason, and that was kind of the plan. And it played into Zach Line not coming back. So, from what I know about CJ Ham, I'm sure he'll be, he will have grasped the role pretty well. So, I guess whether he makes a team or not now, it's going to be based on kind of, how much the Vikings really need a fullback. And I think that's something they'll assess throughout preseason here. And if they feel the need to have a fullback, CJ Ham's going to be the guy, and he'll be on the roster.
Yeah, we haven't talked much about the fullback position, and maybe we should have, honestly, because of kind of the signs we were getting from Zach Line not being immediately re-signed. He seemed kind of like one of those surefire re-up deals, the quick hitter, 1 year, $750K deals. Yep. He never got re-signed, and we heard the rumors that he was speaking with the New York Jets. Still hasn't actually officially signed anywhere, to my knowledge at least. But that might be a sign of the times, and I know that's kind of a cliche, and I intend to use it as a cliche as well, but, it's a sign of the times that Shermer's offense, like Drew said, is not a big fullback offense. But at the same time, there are things wrinkles in the scheme where you can apply an I-form, and, the I-form is such a staple in a rushing first offense, which, I will hold strong on this until Mike Zimmer, his tenure's over in Minnesota. The Minnesota Vikings are a run-first football team. Even if it's 52-48%, they're going to run the ball first. They want to run the ball. I think they made that very clear with the Dalvin Cook and Pat Elflein selections.
And Riley Reef and Mike Remmers.
Exactly. A lot of very good run-first guys. Alex Boone, just for the record, I know this is a couple years out, but he's a mauler. He's known for his run blocking more than his pass protection. But back to the point here, I just think that, CJ Ham offers that versatility, and he offers athleticism at the position, so you don't need to. You're not just chugging out there like a bum to your fullback spot just to lay a hit. At the same time, you could probably use David Morgan in the more blocking specific roles where you need a major block, a kick out block or something like that. So there's some interchangeability there. And at the end of the day, what the best news here is that CJ Ham might be a Viking in September and not just through August.
Yeah, I think the thing that is a little bit confusing for me, though, is Zach Line was not. He was a pretty good athlete himself. He was a running back, I believe, at SMU.
The all-time leading rusher at Southern Methodist, over Eric Dickerson, right?
Oh, geez.
He broke Eric Dickerson's
I didn't know that part. I didn't really.
Yeah.
I knew.
Well, now you do. There's a tidbit for you guys.
That part's confusing to me. Maybe.
I think it's a resources thing. I understand the point, like the confusion point you're making. But I really think it comes down to resources here, where you could just straight up you get to pay less for CJ Ham, and who's a very similar athlete, upside type player. And honestly, I know CJ Ham's only 5'11", but he packs a punch. If you watch him,
absolutely.
You were there. We actually were standing right next to each other watching CJ Ham last year at camp.
Mm-hmm.
That guy hits the hole hard. He was looking for contact in a non-contact practice. So this guy is going to work his tail off to be a very good Minnesota Viking. I trust, if I had to bet today, I would say he doesn't make the roster strictly because I think David Morgan can fill that fullback role no problem. But I wouldn't bet against C.J. Ham because I think he's a very passionate, competitive, quality football player who, when you come out of Division II, and that's kind of my forte because that's the level that I've worked the most on a one-on-one level. Those guys are hungry. They do not mess around. Adam Thielen is the perfect example of this. Adam Shaheen, tight end that we'll be talking about in the next segment here, that the Bears got. It's another guy. All these guys come out very hungry because they were overlooked by Division I schools. Right. And C.J. Ham was a Division I athlete. He just didn't get the love for it. So Augustana's benefit, and once again, I hope that he makes it as a pro because I really like the guy. He's a great character.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I got nothing else to add to that.
All right, then. Well, let's move on to. No, that's good. That's fine. Gives us more time to talk about the NFC North draft classes. So obviously we've already talked about the Vikings class. If you guys haven't, please go back and check it out. It's one of our best videos to date, I believe. One of our best podcasts to date, in my personal opinion. So hopefully you can go back and check that out with Jordan Reed was on the show with us. So, but we're, obviously we follow the NFC North as well. Both Drew and I actually spent an entire, the last season working. Not just covering the Vikings, but also the Bears, Packers, and Lions as well. So we have gotten in tune with these guys, and obviously we've been doing the preview podcast as well. So I feel like we have a fairly solid opinion on these classes. So let's start with the Chicago Bears, since I think that's probably the most fun one to do here.
Yes.
I think let's do this, Drew. We'll talk about it a little bit, and then you give your grade, and then we'll bounce it off to the other one for any rebuttal or final thoughts. So start it off for me. Give me a brief analysis on your thoughts on the class and a grade for the Bears class. How does it stack up against the Vikings if you want to do a Viking spin as well?
First of all, I think that you have to address
the elephant in the room.
The Mitch Trubisky trade. You can't ignore that. It's I don't get it. I really don't. I understand the mentality of getting your franchise quarterback. If you think that's your guy, you have to be willing to give up a lot for him. I get that, but this guy, I didn't see it when I watched him. I think it's going to be a major transition for him as far as moving from the UNC offense to an NFL offense. It's a completely different transition for him. And I saw him as my fourth-ranked quarterback. And so essentially the Bears gave up, I don't even remember what it was, but it's several picks.
It was 2/3, one in the top 96, because I think that's a fourth-rounder next year, and also a sixth-rounder this year, I believe. So in total, they gave up 3 picks in this most recent draft to move up one slot. I think it's important to note that it is only one slot, and there's no guarantee. In fact, reports say that nobody was even trying to leapfrog him.
The Niners weren't picking him.
Right.
And I don't think anybody else is trading up for him. So
at least reports say that nobody was. So.
And they're already paying Mike Glennon $15 million.
Right.
So who knows what Ryan Pace is doing over there? But
give me a grade on that. I'm assuming Adam Shaheen is a nice pickup. Eddie Jackson.
I like Eddie Jackson. I like Eddie Jackson, but. I think if you're giving up that much to get a guy that I didn't see as a first round player.
Right, I'm with you.
I'll go D. I'm going to give him a D. I can't get behind mortgaging your franchise and really your entire draft class for a guy that is very iffy and at a position where you're already spending $15 million on one player you added in free agency. So I don't know. They have a decision to make to a quarterback. Do you play the guy that you traded a whole ton of value for, or do you pay the guy that you're paying a whole bunch of value for? So it's confusing, but it's entertaining and it's good for us because we get to play him twice a year.
Yeah, that's a really good point that it was entertaining. It gave us something to watch on Thursday night when we weren't really expecting much entertainment, but the Bears really got things rolling quickly. Here, let me give you guys some food for thought here, something to apply to your own analysis of the game. When you see a NFL analyst who sides with one team more than another, whether they make it very clear like Drew and I, or they're a little bit more subtle about it, and their favorite team makes a draft pick of a player, see what their reaction to it is, and you can almost certainly judge your grade off of that collective response. So shout out to my former boss here, Mr. Aldo Gandia, Phil Atochin, Mr. Deuce Pesos out there, Shane Marsaw, all those guys over at the Bears Bar Room. I saw their reaction. Lauren Cox as well. That says it all about the Mitch Trubisky pick. Now, at the same time, I will side with some of the more national analysts that have been more, I think, too lenient with this, to be quite honest with you, that they do say if Trubisky pans out and he's a franchise signal caller for 15 years, he not only saves Ryan Pace's career in Chicago, he potentially, alters his franchise, and this pick looks like, chicken scraps. But that needs to happen. And, from my vantage point, from Drew's vantage point, this is not a guy who not worth it. And so that's what makes the pick. That's what really grinds my gears about the Bears class. The number one issue I have with it, though, and it's something that, I kind of take personally because I was so confident in this prediction. I said, a couple months ago when I started reviewing this class, I believe I started reviewing in December because the Vikings had fallen off so hard, that the Bears were going to get their cornerback. They were going to finally get that shutdown cornerback for their outside to complete Vic Fangio's defense. Because if you follow Vic Fangio's 3-4, he puts his guys in man coverage on the outside quite a bit. It's very, very helpful to have a shutdown corner on the outside. The Bears didn't draft a cornerback in this class. I'm shocked. So Drew gave him the D for the Mitch pick. And I kind of leveled it out up to about a C- because I do really like Adam Shaheen. I think he'll be really annoying for Vikings fans this year because he has a big body tight end. That the Vikings, have a problem with. But not getting a cornerback and getting Eddie Jackson, who was an injury concern, I do like him, but he's kind of a question mark coming out. Not getting a cornerback, dude. I had 9 guys given first round grades in my cornerback class. Jordan Reed, another guy, me and him talked about it quite a bit. So many great cornerbacks in this class. There is zero excuse. Zero excuse. So I know Ryan Pace wasn't on the same page as John Fox because obviously we heard that Fox didn't even know about the Trubisky pick.
Have they been ever on the same page?
I don't know. He's clearly not on the same page as Vic Fangio too, because Adrian Amos back there with Prince Amukamara and a first round cornerback, let's give him like Trey Davius White, something like that, where they could kind of pick it up at the bottom of the second round. How about a Tease Tabor, who we're going to be talking about in about 2 seconds here with Detroit? Put him on that roster. That team looks a lot better. So that's why I give the Bears an F overall. So from there,
here's the thing too: they could have traded down.
They could have,
probably still gotten Trubisky out of the deal. They moved down, 4 slots, 5 slots, and they're still going to get their guy. I think. And nobody was high on this quarterback group between Watson, Kaiser, Mahomes. None of them were elite talents.
And think about it like this too. We were a lot higher on this quarterback class, I think, than like NFL scouts were too, because we saw how far Brad Kaya fell too.
That's true. So Kaya was, he was probably by many considered the 5th or 6th quarterback.
Right. I think both of us had him. I think he was my number 6 and you're number 5, and so I guess that kind of says it all. So D from Drew, F from BJ for the Bears class. Let's move on to Detroit so we can stay alphabetically by city. Detroit, I thought, if the Vikings didn't have the best draft class in the North, it's Detroit. And honestly, I would lean towards Detroit because I really think that they had an absolutely outstanding draft class. I'm giving them not a hard A. I give the Vikings a hard A. If you watch the round table, you can understand that inside joke. Until then, I guess you'll just have to try to figure out the GPA scale for hard A versus A.
People in suspense, yeah. Good plug.
Doing a little advertising for the rest of the Vikings territory website as well. Jared Davis is a linebacker where I was hoping that he might slide because he has the range, the sideline to sideline range. He offers, security. Think about what the linebacker position has been like for Detroit Lions fans for the last couple of years. They've had some very good ones, but some of them have been injury prone. I'm thinking DeAndre Levy with that thought. Jared Davis offers stability, and he's going to be a stud. I think he's a 3-down linebacker, but if nothing else, a 2-down thumper that can really get the job done. And I made my thoughts on, Tease Tabor clear on one of our earlier episodes. He's one of my favorite cornerbacks in the entire class. The 4.6 doesn't bother me. I still think he plays faster. I think he plays faster than his film says. So those first 2 picks alone, I'll let you jump in here too and get a piece of it. But those 2 first picks alone are just studly picks that should start day one for Detroit. And I really think they're going to be a problem for the Vikings moving forward, because a guy like Tease Tabor he can follow Stephon Diggs all the way around, inside, outside. I'm just saying, keep an eye out for both of these guys early on, because they're going to make an immediate impact in Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit picked up a lot of playmakers on defense in this draft.
I know exactly where you're going to.
Yeah, the one guy we wanted very badly in that 4th round, and Vikings
could have had him. Took Ben Gideon over him.
Jalen Reeves-Maybin was my guy, too.
Literally the premise of why I gave the Ben Gideon pick a D, because Reeves-Maybin was sitting right there.
He would have been so great in Minnesota. That spot in the outside linebacker base defense where Greenway left and Reeves-Maybin. He's undersized, but he's athletic and he can cover really well.
He's he reminds me a lot of Elijah Lee and Eric Wilson, both of the two guys that the Vikings brought in.
Yeah,
with their ranginess and kind of like their skill set, but Reeves-Maybin is, in my opinion, a much surer bet than both of those guys.
Yeah.
And
he's cleaner,
great value,
he's more reliable in the coverage. Yeah, so from the Vikings aspect, we won't really understand that until maybe things pan out for Gideon. Maybe they don't, but for Detroit, they get a playmaker here on defense to add to Davis, to add to these other these defensive ends, Ledbetter, O'Connor late in the 7th round. And another cornerback, Jamal Agnew from San Diego, too. They lowered it up on defensive playmakers, and it's pretty clear that's kind of, offensively they didn't really have many issues, I guess, scoring last year for the most part. Matthew Stafford for a while was putting up MVP numbers on offense, and they, despite the loss of Calvin Johnson, they kind of had a lot of their wins too were flukes. I'm not going to ignore that, but Matthew Stafford was getting the job done. And on defense, they kind of had some issues. So I think they addressed that for sure, and then they got, they snuck Brad Kaya in in the 6th round as well. So overall solid. I'm not as high as you are on those first 2 picks. But
what do you give? What's your grade?
I'll go B. That's a solid B.
Okay.
I think the Galladay pick in the 3rd round, that receiver, I think that's reaching a little bit.
I was just gonna ask you for your thoughts on that pick, because that one.
I think I think that's a guy. I think they're looking for a specific player there and a big physical guy, and it's pretty clear that they kind of reached for that one player, that one position, and that one role. So
if you look at their depth chart, it makes a lot of sense how his skill set meshes with Golden Tate and
Marvin Jones and Tate are both kind of smaller players. So they're looking for that guy that can be the complement, and I think they may have pigeonholed themselves into getting a guy right there, and I think they could have gotten Galladay in the 4th or 5th even. So that pick, I don't love it, and that kind of brings it down a little bit to a B for me.
Yeah, the one last thing I will say here, and I want to say that this was the reason why I watched film on this guy in the first place was from Gabs on Twitter. So shout out to you for reminding me on this. I believe it was you who had the thought on Michael Roberts from Toledo, the tight end, who they got in the 4th round. I don't have a ton of analysis or knowledge to drop on this guy. He's a guy that had very limited film available during the class, which is another reason why he didn't rank on my top 15 list. But this is a talented player with upside. Michael Roberts from Toledo. Keep him in mind, because I think Detroit is probably looking to get into some 2 tight end sets, because there was a lot of rumors and a lot of hype that David Njoku might be their first overall selection. I think that Davis' selection actually kind of caught a lot of people by surprise. Drew, I think both of us actually had Njoku going to Detroit in our personal mocks. I'm not sure.
I think so, yeah, I did.
It wasn't Davis, I can tell you that much. But they definitely got another talented athletic tight end in Michael Roberts from Toledo. So, again, the guy I don't know a whole lot on, but I would, from what I can see, this is a good pick in the 4th round. So just as a whole, it's a very, very, very good class for Detroit. So Drew gives it a B. I'm giving it an A, but not a hard A. From there,
not a hard A.
Not a hard A, but a solid A. An A without any question marks around it. Now we get into Green Bay, who, again, Drew, I'll let you start this one off, but I'll share my brief on this. That I think that I thought this was a pretty impressive class for Green Bay. I think they, for as much trash as I threw in Ted Thompson's direction over the last month, specifically on that rant that I went on, I think like 10 episodes ago, I thought he came to perform today. He proved why he doesn't need to worry about free agency, because I thought he did a really good job with the resources he had available.
Right. It's pretty clear that they went after defense. I think their first 4 picks were defense.
King, Jones, Adams, and
Kevin King,
Beagle?
Josh Jones, Montravius Adams, Vince Beagle.
Beagle, yep, that's 4.
And then
4 out of 4.
then they went Jamal Adams. But yeah, they found their playmakers on defense, and they addressed their secondary and also got good value with King and Jones. I thought those were both pretty good values given where they're selected at second and third. I think Adams was underrated a bit too. That was kind of a unique take for me, but I thought Adams had some real potential. I thought he was better than what kind of people had. He kind of fell on draft boards.
There's some people who had him very high, like you did. We actually disagreed on this one. I was one of the people that was very low on Montravius Adams. But. Yeah,
so he had some kind of some mental things that in some lapses during games that kind of caused him to look bad on film. But I thought that's another good pick there. And you mentioned before the show a little bit that that dual possibility of Adams and Daniels on the same defensive front is lethal. Is the potentially lethal. So as far as with the Vikings having a rebuild at the offensive line, that's scary for me. And obviously Vince Beagle's most Packers pick ever at linebacker, and then
he's the Ben Gideon of Wisconsin. Honestly, Vince Beagle is just he's the Ben Gideon version of Wisconsin.
Right.
And I'd rather have Michigan than Wisconsin for what it's worth. As a non-Gopher alum,
I can't disagree with that. I can't disagree. But and then they grabbed Jamal Williams, who's another kind of a sleeper running back.
Yep,
there was all kinds of studs in this running back group. But
they got Aaron Jones, boss man, Adam Moore,
Adams guy. Yeah, so
there's some interesting picks for sure.
I think Packers. I think Green Bay's class is better than Detroit's by I think a pretty good.
What would you give them as a grade? What's your?
I'm going A- for their grade. I think they did a really good job of combining, addressing need and also getting value and kind of taking advantage of some of these guys that did slip through the cracks, specifically with King and Jones. And then, I think Adams is kind of a little bit underrated, and getting Jamal Williams, that's another kind of a value pick there at running back. And in this draft there was going to be all kinds of running back value picks, given how great the class was.
Right.
And this is just another one. So I thought Green Bay did a really good job, and I give them an A-, and I think it contends with Minnesota as the best draft class in the NFC North. It's neck and neck right now as far as my immediate reaction. It's neck and neck.
Well, okay, let me get this started off by saying that I love Washington cornerbacks. Washington produces some excellent defensive backs. Marcus Peters, for example, the guy that I wanted when we drafted Trey Waynes. I've made that very clear, I think. They produce some unbelievably talented, NFL-ready athletes. Sidney Jones is the other one. He ended up in Philadelphia, I believe. But the one they got is the healthy one, 6'3" Kevin King, who is going to be a pain in the ass. I guarantee it. This guy he's annoying. He's a loudmouth. He's the perfect guy. Did you guys ever play on a team where there's the guy that always talked a bunch, and you got your team really riled up and pumped, but he just pissed everyone off?
He's Draymond Green.
Draymond Green's a great example. I have a buddy of mine in mind that he used to slide cleats up into second base to break up a double play. Those kind of dudes. That to me is what Kevin King is like. He's going to punch you in the chest off the line of scrimmage. So I hope the Vikings are working on their releases, because this guy is going to be a day one starter. I think. I feel like that's not too hot of a take given what
it's not.
The quarterbacks.
I could start right now prior to the draft on get cornerback for the Packers.
The second guy, Josh Jones, who's a guy that the Vikings actually worked out. So I think we should. This is kind of a random thought that maybe we should look into more. When the Packers and the Vikings, they seem to bring in. Packers seem to draft a lot of guys the Vikings bring into their workouts. So it seems like they have an idea. It keeps happening. Demarius Randall is the one that really sticks out like a sore thumb for me. This year it's Josh Jones. The Vikings were very high on this guy. Packers came in, swooped in, grabbed him. I think that both King and Josh Jones could be day one starters. It depends how they choose to use Morgan Burnett, who he's listed as a strong safety. I think he's a money backer. He's basically a glorified linebacker in that 3-4 look that Capers uses. So I think that you could see Jones and Kevin King both out there to start immediately. And the same could actually be said for the next couple guys in this class. Montravius Adams, I think he could slot in and start. Kenny Clark, their last year's first round pick. He's probably going to continue to start, but you can see Mike Daniels maybe sliding in. You could either have kind of at either of those 5 eye roles, you could have Kenny Clark at the nose tackle spot and then have Mike Daniels and Montravius Adams as your two guys on the side of that 3-4 front. So you could have 3 out of 3 starters, at some point, and then Vince Beagle here, like Drew said, very, very Packers pick. This is, a classic case of a Badger going to a Packer. It's the home run article for any Green Bay Gazette, whatever.
Oh, the home run would have been T.J. Watt, but
This is a
triple. This is a triple.
Yes, this was very good. This was definitely a triple. Yes, and then the last couple guys here, Drew already talked a little bit about the running backs. I'm with him on there. Malachi Dupree from LSU, the wide receiver that they picked very late in the 7th round. I want to say he was like one of the second to last or third to last overall selections in the entire draft. This is a guy that I liked watching his film on, very raw athlete. But, the Packers have this thing where they like to turn over at wide receiver with the exception of one guy, kind of every couple of years. And I think Randall Cobb's time is coming to an end. I'm not saying Dupree is your slot guy, but it makes sense moving forward with guys like Jordy Nelson getting older, Devontae Adams taking on bigger roles. Malachi Dupree, I think, is a nice addition to that wide receiver depth chart. So as a whole, like I said, this Packers did an unbelievable job, top to bottom. I give this one, I give them an A- as well. I still think Detroit's class was better than them, but that brings us to the Vikings, which, like we already talked about this, Drew. We already talked about each of the individual picks and how it stacks up for the Vikes. What did you think, just as an overall grade, comparatively speaking, to these NFC North teams? I think so. I went F Chicago, A for Detroit, A- for Green Bay, and I gave the Vikings a hard A. So you got a solid A in Detroit, an A- in Green Bay, and a hard A for Minnesota, and then just the hardest F of all time. With the Chicago Bears selection. Excuse me on the language.
I think so. I'm trying to remember what my grade. Detroit was a D. No, Chicago was a D. And then I went Detroit B. Then I'm going to go Green Bay, Minnesota, both kind of A-. So I think, as far as ranking it, I'm going to go 1A and 1B, Minnesota and Green Bay in this draft. I think they both did a pretty good job of just addressing needs while also getting value, like I mentioned before. You can point to that with nearly every Vikings pick. I think Packers in particular did so early. And then, Detroit, I don't like how they reached in the 3rd round, but again, they found playmakers on defense. And then Chicago, no. Yeah. That's a dumpster fire. Here's the thing, because if the Vikings don't win at Soldier Field. The Vikings don't win at Soldier Field ever, and if they can't do it this year, when it's either Mike Glennon or Mitch Trubisky playing quarterback, I will be upset. Mike Glennon. I will legitimately believe that it's early curse. So,
I mean, they've won once since the Bush administration at Soldier Field. I believe that was one of the stats that I put out there. That was a stat that I used ahead of Teddy Bridgewater's comeback. By the way, it was a come-from-behind victory that took a 40-yard Stephon Diggs touchdown and a 2-minute drill out of Teddy Bridgewater to get that W at Soldier Field. So, just, a little Teddy remembrance there. Let's move into this, segment that we're doing here. I don't know how long this one's going to last. Kind of depends on what you guys think of it. So, first of all, what the plan is here is we're going to be doing a top 5 ranking for different stuff. This week, it's Rick Spielman's best selections by, in our personal opinion. This is completely subjective based on, what we perceive to be value selections, guys that have really trademarked the franchise. And as we have used in the past, we use the Rick Spielman era begins in 2012 based on when the Triangle of Authority was separated. That's what we used in the past. We'll use that again here. And like I said, this is an unnamed segment. It's unnamed because, for one, I haven't been able to come up with a creative idea for it. Same goes for Drew.
Right.
And secondly, we just kind of decided as a duo that we wouldn't put too much effort into it, just in case one of you guys possibly had a great idea for this top 5 ranking list from BJ and Drew. If you come up with something great, there's a really good chance we'll use it. So please let us know. Where we're at on Twitter.
If you come up with a name, you can be on the show and give your opinion with us as well. So
I will create an intro around your name, like brought to you by X, whatever it is. So,
yeah, that's a good idea.
There will be some sort of reward. We're not in a great position to be handing out rewards, but there will be some sort of plus. Let's call it a plus. You get a plus from us.
For sure.
So, with that said, let's kick into it here. I'll let you go first. Like I said, Rick Spielman's top 5 picks since 2012 when he became the official general manager, ranked. If you want to give some a couple extra guys were just missed, honorable mention types, go for that.
Yeah.
But your goal here is strictly value, who's made the impact, which guys really stand out to you, and what really guys that really define what Rick Spielman has been able to accomplish from a draft perspective.
I'm going to first give my honorable mentions because I think both of these guys they're the same. It's the same year, same round. I'm going to go Anthony Barr and Teddy Bridgewater as my honorable mentions.
I like it. I'm fine with that.
I think with Barr,
Manziel.
He was a 9th overall pick.
Manziel. Everyone wanted Manziel.
I wanted Manziel badly. So
everyone
in that
wanted
regard, yeah, very, very well done. I think in most cases he's going to be in this top 5, and I think it's just because Spielman's hit on so many other guys here that he's not. And then obviously with Teddy, if we had done this a year ago, he'd for sure be in the top 5, given the playoff berth in 2015. So obviously with the knee injury, I can't do that right now, and that's just pure bad luck. But so number 5, I'm going Stephon Diggs. I think the only concern that I have is that the health. Otherwise, if I didn't have those health concerns, he'd be up in the top 3 for sure. But if he can stay healthy, this is an excellent value pick, and he's already shown he can be a stud and has Pro Bowl potential. So for sure, that's another excellent pick by Spielman. Number 5. 4, I'm going Eric Kendricks. You get a guy that essentially was a first-round talent by almost universal opinion, and you get him in the second round.
Definitely my opinion.
And I think by week 3 or 4 in 2015, he was starting. And
he was starting week 1. He started week 1.
Did he start week 1?
He did.
Okay.
Yep. Because remember we made the immediate comparison to Anthony Barr starting week 1 and how these UCLA linebackers are ready to roll. Despite,
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to get that in the second round. And the way, it's not just starting the guy, but actually having him play well and excel.
He's won a ton of single week awards. Very accomplished already entering his third year as a professional now. So definitely a home run pick.
Yeah, exactly. 3, Xavier Rhodes. It took a few years for him to kind of get going. He's a little bit inconsistent up until last year, but last year he surely turned it on. He became that shutdown cornerback he was drafted to be. Excellent pick, and I think for the next few years anyway, the Vikings are pretty set as long as they extend him and find able to negotiate, which I assume will be a tough deal. It's going to be kind of a long process to get Rhodes to sign an extension, but
that will be an issue.
Yeah, it will. It will. I think his agent. There was a couple big names I saw today where he's
Cam Chancellor. Yeah, Andy Carlson. Yeah. If you're not listening, if you don't know who Andy Carlson is, and you're not listening to his podcast, I don't really think I need to give him a shout out. But
that's true. But he listed off today in a tweet. I can't remember what.
Cam Chancellor was one of them. There was a couple of big names there. It's going to be a dogfight. Was the basic premise.
But anyway, Rhodes, his production at this point, it's fair to say Spielman hit with that first round pick that he. I think did he trade up for that one, or he gained that in the trade?
That's Percy Harvin. That was the one that remember when, because that's another one. Everyone freaked out when we traded Percy Harvin to Seattle for the number 25 overall. I'll never forget that one, man. That was a big move for me because that's you'll hear me talk Rhodes on when I get to my list. But
you're not going to miss on Rhodes for sure. But number 2, Danielle Hunter, and this is a little bit more speaking to what he can be, but
sure.
This guy's a freak.
He's already something. Let's be real.
He's already top 5, possibly top 10 pass rusher as far as efficiency.
At least in a 4-3 defense.
It's unprecedented what he's doing and how young he is, and how efficient he is. And you just to find that in the third round, that athleticism, and be able to then have the coaching staff at your disposal as well to kind of mold him into that. That's looking like an A+ pick for sure. And then number 1, I got Harrison Smith. He has essentially set the tone for this Vikings defense since he entered the league. Really, he's been kind of that silent leader, I guess. He's kind of leading by example, is getting a job done, doing all kinds of roles. He's playing center field, he's in the box safety. He's a jack of all trades player.
Absolutely.
And he kind of sets the tone for Mike Zimmer's defense. So that's my number 1. So kind of quick to recap, I had Barr and Bridgewater as my honorable mention. I had Diggs number 5. I had Kendricks number 4. Xavier Rhodes number 3. Danielle Hunter number 2. And then I put Harrison Smith as the top pick that Rick Spielman's ever made as a full-time or I guess full general manager.
So you kind of did. You went more results-oriented picks over value selection. It seems like for the most part, with the exception of Danielle Hunter being all the way up at number 2. But like you kind of docked Stephon Diggs. I kind of had this past draft class as an exception. Right.
I would totally understand if you put in a bunch of these guys too. Dylan, Fine. Those guys are both. For sure.
What I did for this is, Drew and I obviously prepared this segment and obviously wanted a good way to start it out. So what I did is I went ahead and I listed 8 guys, and I'm going to rank them now. Instead, I didn't do this previously because I wanted to kind of get into the flow of things and see where I was at once we actually started talking about this. But my honorable mentions are Xavier Rhodes, Shamar Stephen, and Rhett Ellison. And Xavier Rhodes could very easily be in the top 5. The reason why he's not is because he is a first-round pick. Harrison Smith is in my top 5 and is a first-round pick. I just consider him to be an even better value in the first round than Xavier Rhodes was. But like I just said, Xavier Rhodes is one of my all-time favorite selections. If you must know, he is my favorite current Viking, and I have his jersey up on my wall. Not this wall, obviously, but a different one. So I love the selection. I think he's earned every bit of being that number 25 pick, and I'm thrilled because I was ready to move on from Percy Harvin, and a lot of my buddies and the people, at that point in my career were giving me crap for saying that the Vikings got a raw deal with that trade to Seattle. So I love that Rhodes has panned out in the way he has. And it's kind of, as a buffer, the fact that Sharif Floyd and Cordero Patterson have been kind of on different routes. Yeah. It is nice to see that they nailed at least one. So if you're shooting 33%, that's not horrible. So Rhodes, Shamar Stephen, who deserves so much more credit for the role he plays. Basically a glorified backup nose tackle, but he contributes snaps. 7th round selection. Vikings got a lot more than they paid for in that pick. Same goes for Rhett Ellison. I know he's a Giant now. I know his father's a little bit out of his mind, but Rhett Ellison was outstanding. He continued the Klein Saucer role well in Minnesota for sure. That outstanding player that will be missed this season to some degree, we'll still see. At number 5, I'm going to put Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook selection, if you've heard me on the roundtable, my excitement over the pick, unbelievable. I didn't think he was in the realm of possibilities. I was talking to a coach ahead of the draft, and he said, this particular coach happens to be a Vikings fan as well, and he was just saying, Dalvin Cook's still on the board. And I kept talking about Joe Mixon. He kept hammering Dalvin Cook on me, and I was like, I just don't see Dalvin Cook slipping that far. And he was like, I don't either, but that's just that guy is an absolute home run threat. And, Cook is a guy that I've loved since the get-go. I've always had him above Fournette. Mixon ended up getting the nod over him on my final top 5, but this is a guy that he's going to change the direction of this franchise moving forward.
They're interchangeable too. We talked about that too, where those top 4 running backs were absolutely interchangeable for the most part.
Right. So he's an ultimate value selection at number 41 overall. I think that number 41 overall selection will kind of live in infamy once this career is over. Dalvin Cook is going to be a stud. There's your BJ Reidell guarantee. At number 4, I'm putting Harrison Smith. Same reason that Xavier Rhodes is knocked on this list. I'm going more value and kind of long-term what they do. Obviously, Harrison Smith has already accomplished so much. I've spoken up about him being the best overall safety in the NFL. I still stand firm on that. Rick Spielman did a great job to move up late in the first round to grab Harrison Smith. I believe the pick that everyone wanted was Manti Te'o when Rick Spielman drafted Harrison Smith.
I wanted that too.
Yeah, I did too. If I'm being quite frank with you guys, it was very early in my career. I didn't even know who Harrison Smith was. I hadn't graded him as a safety. So there's that. Harrison Smith, tremendous value.
There's that. Yeah.
31 overall, I believe. I'm a big fan of that pick. He comes in number 4 on my list. Number 3, Eric Kendricks. I'll keep it short and simple. With regard to the 2015 class, I consider the Vikings drafting Kendricks at 11 and Waynes at 46 or whatever it is. Or
45?
45, whatever that is. I consider Eric Kendricks to be the first-round pick of that class because he was the guy that I wanted for the Vikings at 11. Outstanding player. I really think his career is going to continue to be an impact player. More his role is intensified and more reps he plays. This is a guy that just continues to get better. I think he'll be a long-time Viking. I think he's a Ring of Honor candidate by the end of his career. So love that selection in the second round. Move on to number 2 here. These last 2 ones on my list, I think you guys probably know which guys they are, but how I'm going to change them. I'm going to say that this guy right here, Mr. Stefon Diggs, the 5th round selection in 2015, is the number 2 pick in Rick Spielman's tenure. I think that this is an evidence to Rick Spielman's ability to find studs that have a skill or a couple of skills with a couple of question marks and identify them in the mid-rounds, bring them in, and allow his coaching staff to just do work. That is what Stefon Diggs has done. If you look at his tape at Maryland, he was a great all-around, all-purpose threat. Kind of looks a lot like Rodney Adams on tape, just a little bit stronger and better with at the point of attack. But Stefon Diggs, diamond in the rough. This is a guy that I've done a lot of work on. He's one of my absolute favorite players in the NFL, on the Vikings, whatever it is. Great steal for the Vikings in the 5th round. And then number 1, Danielle Hunter is already so much. He's already so talented. Yeah. He's already, in Vikings history for what he's been able to accomplish as a pass rusher. He's just going to continue to get better. And, I really think that if someone's going to catch Jared Allen's Vikings record for sacks in a single season, or Michael Strahan's single season, or is it Von Miller's sacks record now? J.J. Watt's sack record? Whoever's sack record it is now. I think it's at 22 or 23 in a season. Danielle Hunter is a good candidate to do it, considering what he's been able to. I think he's started 1 game so far, and he's been used basically as a rotational guy. Double-digit sacks last season. I think it was like 6.5 his first year. This guy's a stud. I really like his potential, and as a 3rd-round pick that a lot of guys weren't high on, myself included, that's a steal for Rick Spielman, and I think that will go down as one of his ultimate picks as a GM, period, in his regard.
Yeah, I think one thing we should probably give Spielman credit for here, too, with Hunter is Everson Griffin, who that was obviously before he was the all-encompassing GM, but he certainly had a lot of say in the draft picks back, was it 2010? And
4th round selection for Griffin, yeah.
That's another excellent pick the Vikings made there, and that's obviously having an influence on Hunter because, obviously you can't. That's a lot of one-on-one matchups for one. You can't throw all your attention to Hunter or all your attention to Griffin. So that's the Vikings have done pretty well in adding these defensive playmakers. Smith, Hunter, Griffin, Kendricks, Barr, all these guys that. They're hitting on them.
There are other names too, that we can bring up that in a couple of years, these middle to late round selections, guys like Anton Exum, for example, could end up being he's still developing.
Johnson.
Jaleel Johnson. J-Ron Kearse is my guy from last year that I was very high on. And we could talk about the undrafted free agents too if you want to incorporate them into one draft class or whatever. Anthony Harris is a guy that stands out of Virginia. That Spielman was able to scoop up at a value. I think the underlying point here is we need to appreciate what Rick Spielman does for the Vikings from a draft perspective. He's done a tremendous job. That's the bold point here.
Yeah, this defense that the Vikings have kind of built, it's really Rick Spielman's built it through the draft for the most part. You look at all these playmakers I'm just thinking about. Smith, Rhodes, Barr, Kendricks. And whoever starts at linebacker now, it's Lee or if it's Gideon or whoever. That's a draft pick.
Right.
Everson Griffin's a draft pick. Neil Hunter's a draft pick.
Michael Mauti, Adi Cole, some of these guys.
They're not adding free agents very often. They had Captain Munnerlyn and Linval through free agency over the past couple of years, but I can't think of another player that's contributed significantly that wasn't through the draft.
If you think about it too, if Rick Spielman's 1st round picks haven't been great, if you think about it over the last couple of years, Treadwell, Waynes, 2014, that was Barr and Bridgewater. So Bridgewater obviously kind of hurts. Barr wasn't, Anthony Barr was going to be a home run pick. I think that last year is kind of an anomaly.
I think overall right now with Barr, I think you've gotten what you've kind of invested for. In first round pick.
So if we think about 1st round, so Matt Khalil and Harrison Smith, that's 50%. Xavier Rhodes, Cordero Patterson, and Sharif Floyd, that's 33%. Yeah. Barr and Bridgewater, I'm going to say that's 100% just because Bridgewater did do so much. But, I'm going to say it's 100% with kind of an asterisk because, we don't know what Bridgewater could have became.
It's a 1.5 out of 2. So
okay, yeah. Let's go
75%.
1.5. Let's go 1.5. I'm going to give Trey Waynes a 0.5 out of 1 since we are using the decimal system here, because he could still very easily be a surefire stud there. And then Treadwell, I'm not going to even give the 0.5 at this point. I'm just, I don't know.
0.25.
And then obviously no first round pick in 2017, but as a whole, he's been a phenomenal general manager from a draft perspective, and I think that our rankings probably reflect that to some degree.
And it's necessary too to be that good in the draft, because I mean,
that's the
in
difference
free agency.
between
In free agency, it's pretty an unfair slate what the Vikings are given this front office, and trying to get free agents to the cold and against the taxes and the high tax rate and everything.
Yep.
They're at a disadvantage. So building through the draft is how the Vikings are going to have to win championships. And right now, the Vikings are on that path thanks to Rick Spielman.
All right, so that rounds out our first top 5 segment. Like I said, if you guys have a great name for it, let us know. Otherwise, there will probably be a name for it next time we drop an episode, which will be this Friday. So look for that then. Until then, you know where to find us. iTunes, VikingsTerritory.com, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio. YouTube is the new one. Yeah, so we've been recording. If you guys may have noticed last week, we noticed that some of you guys checked it out. Thanks for that. We're going to be putting these videos up on YouTube. So if you want to actually watch Drew and I physically record, obviously you can see we've begin to revamp our image. Redecorate, yeah. The Klein Saucer jersey for Drew, and I got my digs up in the back. So if you want to watch us record these on YouTube, that's going to be available now. That'll be on VikingsTerritory.com or the YouTube page as well. So keep an eye on that if you're interested in that way. Otherwise, keep listening to it as is, and appreciate the feedback. Find us on Twitter, as always, at VikingsATLPod. Myself, at Robert Reidell, that's Reidell, and Drew, at Drew Mahowald, Mahowald, and the last name there. So that's where you can find us all on Twitter, and make sure to check out our content on VikingsTerritory.com, and we'll see you guys later on this week.